Most of us would find it pretty easy to recall a time where we felt really self-conscious, like everyone was looking at us maybe for good reasons, or perhaps for not so good reasons. But is our sense of our own conspicuity really justified? In this video, I'm going to tell you about a couple of key studies within psychology that you might want to bear in mind next time you're feeling a bit self-conscious. In 2000, Gilovich et al. Conducted an interesting study that compared how noticeable or conspicuous people thought what they said and did was to how conspicuous it had been to those around them. To do this, groups of 3 to 7 participants were asked to take part in a group discussion on a reasonably contentious topic. After the discussion, each group member was asked to rank the performance of other group members, including themselves. This was done in relation to pre-specified criteria, such as how many times someone had said something that advanced the discussion, or how many times someone had said something that other members of the group might have been critical of. Here's the twist in the study. Participants were asked to rank each member of the group on 2 occasions. On the first occasion, they gave the rank that they felt was personally appropriate. On the second occasion, they were asked to estimate the average rank that would have been assigned by the group for the individual in question. This allowed the experimenters to compare each individual participant's perception of how they would be ranked by the other members of the group to how the other members of the group actually ranked them. The results of the study indicated that participants were assigning higher rankings to their own contributions to the group discussion, irrespective of whether those contributions were positive or negative, than the other group members. In other words, they felt that their contributions had been more noticeable or conspicuous than in actuality they had been. The experimenters named this finding the spotlight effect. But the question then became, well, what causes it? Gilovich et al. Speculated that the reason we tend to view ourselves as being more conspicuous in the eyes of others than we actually are is that we spend most of our lives looking at the world from our own subjective viewpoint. As a result of this, we tend to get stuck or anchored in this viewpoint and impose our own subjective viewpoint onto others. So if we do something that we think is really embarrassing, we tend to get preoccupied or anchored in our own subjective sense of shame. And this blinds us to the fact that the people around us who are busy getting on with their own lives and who are viewing the world through their own unique subjective perspective may not have even noticed what we did. To determine if the spotlight effect might be due to individuals getting stuck in their own subjective perspectives, Gilovich et al. Conducted a further study in which undergraduate students were assigned to one of 2 groups. In the target participant group, individuals were asked to wear a t-shirt that was given to them by the experimenter. Half of the target participants wore a t-shirt featuring a portrait of Barry Manilow, which, in case you don't know, would be considered social kryptonite to any self-respecting undergraduate. The other half of the target participants wore a t-shirt featuring a portrait of Bob Marley, who most students would regard as being really cool. The other group of participants, referred to as the observers, were not given a t-shirt to wear. They were simply asked to sit at a long table and told that they would be taking part in an experiment. One of the experimenters then asked the target participant to enter the room containing the observers wearing their newly acquired t-shirt. But before the target participant could make themselves comfortable in the room, another experimenter asked them to leave as the study was not yet ready for them. The experimenter in the room with the observers then asked them how many of them could identify the figure that had been depicted on the target participant's shirt. Meanwhile, the experimenter who had been dealing with the target participant asked them how many people in the room did they think had noticed the figure depicted on their shirt. Sure enough, the target participants overestimated the number of observers who were able to identify the face depicted on their t-shirt, irrespective of whether that t-shirt was socially embarrassing or socially commendable. Basically, they felt conspicuous, so they assumed that the observers would see them as being conspicuous. So if getting past the spotlight effect is all about negating our own subjective sense of how conspicuous we are, then wouldn't a way of dealing with it be to simply assume the perspective of an observer? Well, Macrae et al. In 2016 conducted their own version of the Gilovich study, but with a few twists. The participants were asked to imagine they were having a conversation with a few friends in the entrance to a familiar lecture theatre, during which time 40 of their fellow students walked past them to enter the room. They were then shown a picture of the t-shirt they were to imagine wearing in this scenario. One group of participants was shown a picture of a t-shirt bearing a large portrait of Miley Cyrus, on the basis that this would make the t-shirt rather embarrassing to wear. The participants were given explicit instructions in terms of what perspective they should take when imagining the scenario, either a first-person perspective or a third-person perspective. They were then given 20 seconds to imagine the scenario. After this, participants were asked how embarrassed they had felt in the imagined scenario, and also what proportion of the 40 students that walked past them in the imagined scenario would have noticed the t-shirt they were wearing. Sure enough, participants who imagined the scenario in the first-person perspective reported feeling more embarrassed and indicated that a greater number of students who had walked past them in the scenario would have noticed their t-shirt than participants who imagined the same scenario in the third-person perspective. So the next time you feel self-conscious and perhaps like everyone is looking at you, it's worth remembering that research from psychology often suggests that your actions and words, irrespective of whether you feel they reflect positively or negatively on you, are not nearly as noticeable to others as you might think. Your perception of how conspicuous you are is a product of the fact that you default to viewing the world from your own subjective perspective. This anchors your judgment about how obvious your words and deeds are to others, who are also rooted in their own subjective perspectives at an artificially high level. The spotlight effect is something of a double-edged sword. On the positive side, it means that the slightly embarrassing stuff that you do or say probably flies under the radar for most people. Unfortunately, it also means that the same people probably aren't going to be as receptive as you'd hope when you do or say something particularly commendable.
There it is, Homer. The cleverest thing you'll ever say and nobody heard it.
Go!
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please do hit the like button. If you're interested in more content on psychological research and its application to life, and you haven't done so already, then do subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell notification icon so you know when I post new content. Thanks very much.